My name's Dominic. I'm a professional ethicist, a salesman and a soldier. 3 things that you don't normally find together, but life's a journey. I'm very lucky to have a friend here, Gordon, who has written an astounding book. A book that shall amaze, educate, enlighten, possibly even make you yearn to get back to the joys of life pre-COVID. Or was it beyond? The before times. It could change your life, it might not, but then again, I'm a salesman, so take this with a pinch of salt. Very proud to introduce this book, because I got to tell you, it's a rip snorter. He doesn't just go in there and, oh God, if you're like me, you love a good place, your thought experiments, aren't they great? Thought experiments, philosophers love thought experiments so much. Jasper Fforde even wrote a chapter about it in one of his books. We love the thought experiments. Gordon doesn't have time for thought experiments, because the world is the greatest thought experiment we have. And it's right around us. We're in it. We're involved in it. We sometimes walk in it and have to get it off our shoes. The world is the best place to start. And that's why you can open up Gordon's book anywhere and you'll find something and you think, oh, I read about that. You mean this is a real ethical scenario? The answer is yes. And you're involved in it because you're involved in the world. And if you want to make the world a better place, well, Gordon's been listening to the way the world talks and he's got an understanding of these big issues. And I think it's time that I introduce Gordon to tell you a little bit about it. Thank you.
So I've got a thought experiment for you. It is the only one. We did make a real emphasis, so I did make a real emphasis when writing this to try and make it as real as possible. So it's full of case studies and so forth. But as Dom said, and thank you again, Dom, could not ask for a better MC, the whole point of this book was to try and figure out why it wasn't working, right? We spend a whole 10 years or so working in the ethics space trying to figure out, okay, so I can demonstrate that this is the best way course of things. Why aren't I allowed to do it? That's what this was about, by trying to figure that out and trying to look at real world scenarios to figure that out. That said, all of this started, believe it or not, and as much as I'm loath to say, with a Facebook post. Several people in here were unfortunately caught up in the collateral of that, but it was all around a simple scenario, because what I like to do with my work is to take something that everyone has lived, very mundane experience, and then just point out why it's like that. Why is it so weird? Right? And to that end, I have for you the corridor confrontation. So the only thought experiment in the whole book, I swear. So, to illustrate the complexity of various forms of power and their interaction in practice, consider the following scenario, if you will. You're at your workplace. Things are busy and you have places to be, so you're walking at a quick pace with things on your mind. You're just passing through a long, narrow corridor, looking down at your phone and trying to organize your plans, when you glance up and realize there's someone coming the other way who has just realized the same thing. The corridor is too narrow for you both to pass. Someone needs to make way. Who moves? And more importantly, why do they move? It's a simple situation and one you've likely encountered many times before, but answering it is a lot trickier than it may initially seem. Who is the person coming the other way? How do they relate to you? If it's your boss coming the other way, then the obvious choice is for you to make way for them. Why? Because they have seniority over you and formal powers within the company hierarchy to reward or punish you, often completely at their own discretion. Thus, the smart move is to make way, right? Show some deference, respect, or simple politeness. It certainly can't hurt. Or can it? Depending on the culture within your organization, this might be taken as a sign of weakness or automatic deference, indicating a sufficiently cutthroat boss that this person offers no challenge to them, and as such is beneath their notice and respect. Alternatively, in an egalitarian workplace, such automatic deference might make your boss very uncomfortable, tarnishing an otherwise positive relationship and even making them somewhat resentful that they didn't get the opportunity to demonstrate their own benevolence. For a boss who styles themselves as just one of the team, highlighting their authority like this could, ironically, be seen as quite threatening. Never mind relationships of formal authority. What if it's a colleague who's approaching? With no difference in formal authority over each other, how is it decided who moves? A massive number of variables come into play here, and let's start with an easy one. What if your colleague is of a different gender from you? On the one hand, it's quite likely that a woman glancing up from her phone to discover herself on a collision course with a male colleague is likely to get out of the way by default. Why? Well, for starters, there's the purely physical factors to consider. Men are statistically, but certainly not always, More likely to be heavier, stronger, and more comfortable with both of these qualities than women are. I have a reference for this. Meaning that if a collision were to occur, the woman is likely to be both be moved and to be trampled into the bargain. Thus, the man has power over the decision. This probable physical reality may in fact lead to the exact opposite result, however, thanks to the additional factor of gender roles. If men are widely accepted as being physically superior, then the image of the strong man forcing the weak woman to make way is a particularly toxic image for the man involved. Indeed, where the traditional gender roles are strongest, it may be expected that men show deference to women in such circumstances under the responsibilities of gentlemanliness. A concession to the gender role of women may be concession to the gender role of women being physically inferior, with their protection from violence therefore being the responsibility of men. While the physical reality of our hallway confrontation is that the man statistically has the advantage, in practice social norms result in the woman assuming right of way and the man making way by default. Thus the woman has power over the situation. Many will reject such primitive notions as physical dominance and gender roles, choosing and perhaps even succeeding to ignore irrelevant categories such as gender, race, physical dimensions, organisational status, and other such simplistic factors. If we eliminate these factors, how then is the decision made as to who moves and who does not? Perhaps you choose to make way proactively in order to be polite, sacrificing your own immediate interest of getting through the hallway quickly in order to serve your more strategic interest of being seen as a kind, considerate person. In terms of power, this may appear to be giving up your control to your colleague. After all, you are the one making way for them. But in reality, such a choice is often still an act of power, since you are still making the choice and controlling the outcome regardless of what that outcome may be. If you have ever had a person hold the door open for you just a little bit too far away, forcing you to do that awkward jog in order to not appear underappreciative, then you will know that such an act of apparent deference by the door holder can make you feel very disempowered indeed. Such power through deference plays heavily off social norms that encourage and reward politeness. In effect, the reward of being seen as polite is perceived as more important than the practical need to get through the corridor. And our tacit, often subconscious understanding of that reality is why we occasionally find ourselves in a situation where both of the people in our corridor make way for each other and engage in a painful game of who is the most polite, causing considerable discomfort for both parties and delivering the worst possible practical outcome as both people get stuck in the corridor at the same time, all to ensure that neither attracts the nebulous label of being rude. Regardless of how you personally would approach this situation and who the person at the other end of the corridor is, one thing remains consistent in this scenario. A decision needs to be made as to who gets out of the way. Based on our definition of power, which, for those who haven't read the book yet, is your ability to control your circumstances and subsequently the circumstances of others, it is the person who has control over how this decision gets made that is the powerful party in this scenario, regardless of whether they then choose to walk or choose to stand aside. So the rest of the book subsequently goes into understanding where that power comes from, various 7 sources that I subsequently identified, and more importantly how the power moves between parties, because that's where things get weird. Because you would think that having a concentration of power, by that definition, would only be a good thing, right? And that, I know this sounds like marketing, it genuinely shocked me. It actually shocked me. I had quite a moment when I realized that having a concentration of power like that is not actually a good thing. It has some real serious problems. And a lot of the management issues that we subsequently see with the ethics side of things, as Dom quite rightly illustrated there, it all comes down to that. People think that having power is always a good thing. It's not, as it turns out. So, if you're interested, we have copies available for sale over there. So it's on the honour system, as you would expect from an ethicist. But yeah, otherwise, thank you very much for coming today. And I'm going to hand over to my father, Chris, who would like to say a couple of things.
Thanks very much, Gordon and Dom. I'm a partner with Gordon in his consulting business, and we work together. After the scenario that's Gordon laid out, I'm just thinking of Tony Abbott and Julia Gillard crossing in the corridor. And I'm not sure what happens.
Basically growing.
I like the answer. Right. Since 2005, Victoria and Australia has had over 20 royal commissions and inquiries from Aboriginal deaths in custody, aged care, family violence, institutional child abuse, banking, and now we're on to casinos. All of these inquiries and recommendations put significant emphasis on improving regulations and oversight. And these are needed, and they will help repeat, in some cases, some of the mistakes. But regulation alone will never stop poor human behaviour, which is also found in many of these inquiries. People are fallible to greed and power, especially when there's large amounts of money involved. It's up to all of us to model the right sort of behaviours and to be proactive in supporting them. All of us need to understand how power works in order to be vigilant about the abuse of power. Reading and understanding this book will go a long way to arming you with the knowledge you need. There's a saying, the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept. I believe we now need to move the bar up. In future, we will not walk past the closed doors, but open it and have a conversation about good behaviour and ethics. Thank you.
All right, well, you've had the pitch, and I hope that you've been drinking deeply of the knowledge that's been conveyed in front of you tonight. Now, I note that we have two different kinds of cocktails here. We've got the powerful and the ethical. So those of you who drank the ethical, I'll expect you to form an orderly queue over to the books and make way for everybody who needs to get to the front of the queue. For the powerful, just go for it. And as for the rest, it's well known among social scientists that concision is correlated with intelligence. So thank you.